Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Spellbook Prophecy Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile. The Prophecy Spellbooks were always a favorite of mine from the Return of the Duelist booster set. Finally collected up some of the other cards that I was still needing for the deck from the latest collection that I picked up. So I figured I'd update the deck with the changes made to it, sticking to more of a use for a good number of the different Prophecy cards. Plus, we've also had Spellbook of Judgment come off the ban list to a full 3 of power, helping out with the search and setup that this deck can do all together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with our main deck monsters for our Spellbook monsters, or our Prophecy monsters, running 3 copies of Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. When this card is normal, or summoned, or flipped face up, you can add 1 Spellbook spell card from your deck to your hand. So the Spellbook spell cards are the most important part of the deck. They set up so many of our activation plays, their search and setup, you name it. So just having a monster that can also be searched out with one of our Spellbooks is very, very useful and important in the deck to be able just to continue along those plays. Now, this deck can play in a pretty good control play style, so I also run 3 copies of Yugioh the Spiritualist. With this card, you can discard 1 random card from your hand to the graveyard to destroy all special summon monsters on the field. Neither player can special summon monsters. This lockdown can be quite impressive, because then you can make a board to protect your Yugioh. If your opponent can't special summon, they really only have their normal summon, but you can take out their normal summon with one of the other cards we run in the deck. So just locking down special summoning in general is a big part of why I like this deck. You have your search and setup with Spellbook Magician, and then just your complete lockdown with this card on the field as well for the setup that you can easily do to bring it out on the field also. Now, the last 2 Spellbook or Prophecy monsters that I run include the 1 High Priestess of Prophecy and the 1 Temperance of Prophecy, kind of adding a different engine into the deck. Being we do have the Special Summon Lockdown, we do have this 1 Special Summon that can be easily brought out with either Temperance summoning out High Priestess, or even using our Spellbook of Judgment to grab either one of these monsters. Just if we activate a Spellbook, we can use the Temperance of Prophecy to tribute it to Special Summon a level 5 or higher Light or Dark Spellcaster from our deck, so we can use it to grab High Priestess, or we can just use the Reveal 3 and special summon this card, and then having the banish of a Spellbook card from our hand or graveyard to target a card on the field and destroy it. So more destruction power when we use these cards also. And then lastly, for the main deck monsters, 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. Just an additional hand trap. The major majority of all the cards you want to have in your hand are the spellbooks for you to use, but still having 1 hand trap that can just stop our opponent's send and setup always come in handy. That's why I like to run the 3 in the deck. And now for the most important part of the deck, which are the spell cards. We run 3 copies of Spellbook of Secrets. You add 1 spellbook card from your deck to your hand. Except for Spellbook of Secrets, you can only activate 1 Spellbook of Secrets per turn. You can use it to search out your Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, since it just says a Spellbook card. And then you can summon out your Spellbook Magician of Prophecy and use that to grab an additional card. Or if you have it in reverse order, you can summon out your Spellbook Magician, use it to grab Secrets, and then use Secrets to grab your additional Spellbook card. And also 3 copies of Spellbook of Knowledge. Send to the graveyard either 1 spellcaster monster you control or 1 other Spellbook card from your hand or face up on your field, except Spellbook of Knowledge to draw 2 cards. You can only activate Spellbook of Knowledge once per turn, but still, having these send and set up, we could even go for the option of sending our Yugioh, being the spellcaster on the field, to the graveyard to draw 2, and then just clearing out the lock for our special summon, so we can then utilize the special summon power in the deck thanks to this card and its draw power that it provides. It can even be one of the additional cards that you search out with your go-to for Spellbook of Secrets. Just a preference and depends on what else you have in your hand. And we are running 3 copies of Spellbook of Judgment. During the end phase of the turn this card is activated, add Spellbook spell cards from your deck to your hand except for Spellbook of Judgment up to the number of spell cards activated after this card's resolution. Then you can special summon from your deck 1 spellcaster monster whose level is less than or equal to the number of cards added to your hand by this effect. So you can even use this card if you activate enough spellbooks to grab either your High Priestess or your Temperance off of this summon or one of our other spellcaster type monsters, but the fact that it's at 3 now for its full power just gives us more and more search and setup thanks to this card. And also the 3 Spellbook of Fate, having this as our go-to protection for our Jowgen on the field. So we have our protection from our opponent's monsters that may try to go over it, because then we have a Spellbook that's just based on how many we banish, can, banish a card on our opponent's field, flip a card face down, or even return one set spell trap on the field to the hand as a potential end phase to, if they have a card set on the field, we can use this card for its banish, or the fact that it doesn't target with the banish play to get rid of an opponent's monster on their field also, or just any card in general. I also like running the 3 Spellbook Star Hall. Each time a Spellbook card is activated, place 1 spell counter on this card. All spellcaster monsters you control gain 100 attack for each spell counter on this card. And when this card with the spell counter is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 spellcaster type monster from your deck to your hand, whose level is less than or equal to the number of spell counters that are on it. Now, a big thing also is that you can, build up the attack of your Jowgen quite consistently if you have multiple Star Halls, and then just activate spell after spell. Each time one is activated, placing those counters, building up the stacked power to make it all the more difficult for your opponent to be able to get over your Jowgen to begin with the use of your Spellbook Star Hall, which can also be searched out in the deck also. And then for some of the lower numbers for our spellbooks, 2 copies of the Grand Spellbook Tower. Once per turn during your standby phase, if you have a spellcaster type monster on your side of the field or in your graveyard, you can return 1 spellbook spell from your graveyard to the bottom of your deck, except for the Grand Spellbook Tower, and then draw 1 card. And when this card is destroyed by your opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 spellcaster monster from your hand or deck, whose level is less than or equal to the number of spellbook spell cards in your graveyard. Added special summon power, but it's just meant to be a draw 2 that you can invest with recycling your other spellbook cards back into the deck also. Also running 2 copies of Spellbook of the Master, being able to copy the effect of a card revealing another spellbook in your hand, targeting one in your graveyard, and then gaining the effect of that spellbook thanks to Spellbook of the Master. 2 copies of Spellbook of Eternity for adding back our banished spellbook cards from our banished zone to our hand, so then we can reuse them again. And for our 1-ofs for our spellbooks, the 1 copy of Spellbook of the Crescent, an early game one if you have no spellbook cards in your hand, revealing 3, and then your opponent randomly picks 1 for you to add to your hand, and then the rest go back into the deck. You can even copy this card with your Spellbook of the Master from the graveyard, since it doesn't have to copy the cost, which is having no spellbooks. It just copies the initial search effect. The 1 Spellbook of Wisdom for a spell and trap protection option, Spellbook of Life for more revival from the graveyard plays, and the 1 Spellbook of Power for the additional 1000 boost for any of our spellcasters, and then when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, being able to add an additional spellbook card from our deck to our hand. And then also the 2 copies of Pot of Desires. You run plenty of spells that if you banish a couple, we're not really running the 1 Judgment, so even if you banish 1 or 2, you can still have the potential to draw into the 1, and then easy recycle for other cards for the Pot of Desires to put on the bottom of the deck from our graveyard once we use them to keep us from decking out. And the 1 copy of Call by the Grave and the 1 copy of Terraforming to finish off the main deck. For the extra deck, I run 2 copies of Crowley, the First Prophecyr. Being 2 spellbook types, if it's link summon, you can reveal 3 spellbook cards with different names in your deck. Your opponent randomly picks 1 for you to add to your hand. Shuffle the rest in the deck. You can use this effect of Crowley once per turn, and each turn, 1 level 5 or higher spellcaster you normal summon can be normal summon without attributing, as a way to get out our High Priestess of Prophecy without even needing to use her own effect, just as a normal summon. And then also the 1 copy of Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden, 1 Selene Queen Master of Magicians, 1 Underclock Taker, along with 1 Herald of Mirage Lights, 1 Lena the Light Charmer, and then also 1 Puzzlo Mino, the Drop and Deleter, 1 Nightmare Cerberus, 1 Salmon-Great Almirage, 1 Barricade Board Blocker, and the 1 Nightmare Unicorn, with our bigger link monsters being 1 Apollosa, 1 Borreload, and the 1 Underworld Goddess. You really don't go into them much, but still, there are options in the deck for you to use. With our added plays in the deck being the initial setup that I mentioned before. Spell setup is the big part of the deck, so just normal summoning out your Spellbook Magician can then give you your Spellbook of Secrets, which activating your secrets can then be used to add to your hand your Spellbook of the Master, and then you just need the 1 other additional spell being a Spellbook card in your hand. Depending on that Spellbook card, you just reveal it, activate Master, and then copy the effect of the secrets in the graveyard, so then you can go go for the additional search of another card from your deck to your hand, and then that's 2 in the graveyard for you to use. You can either go for the Spellbook of Fate, or if you wanted to, you have the Judgment in your hand, which if you had Judgment in hand, make sure you activate it before any of the other cards, so you have those spells building up after you use this, so you have more search at the end of the turn as well. But most of the time you can go for Knowledge, because then you can send your Spellbook Magician for an additional draw 2, and that could be your potential draw into additional cards for you to use, because don't forget Spellbook of Judgment is a quick play, so if you plan to use cards like Spellbook of Fate on your opponent's turn, you have that option as well with Fate to banish an opponent's card. It all depends on just the big amount of Spellbook setup that you can do. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.